What were the most important takeaways from the Week 11 Sunday action in fantasy football? What were our reactions to surprising, disappointing, and the injury updates you need to know? It's time to break it down right here, right now, as we begin another edition, another week of Locked On Fantasy Football.
Are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. As usual, I'm your host, Vinnie Iyer, but I'm not doing this. I'm writing about NFL and fantasy football for SportingNews.com. What a Week 11 it was. We had some big performances, including Travis Kelce there on Sunday night, a 3-touchdown game. He now leads the NFL in touchdown receptions. We also had Jamal Williams with a trifecta early in the day for the Lions. So he leads the league in rushing touchdowns. That's how this season has gone in fantasy football. Very interesting developments here over round. And we're going to look at the surprises there, the standout performances as well from Week 11 and the Sunday action. Then we'll look at the big disappointments and then the even bigger disappointments, because these are players that got hurt and maybe changed our fantasy football fortunes. But it was a brutal day there. We didn't have a lot of scoring. There was a few explosive games, but a lot of the stars that we're counting on, Vikings, really came up small in the week. So we had some big performances, some tiny performances there. So we'll make sense of it all here with our reactions here on Locked On Fantasy Football to begin a week here on a Monday. Today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is presented by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. Pick 2 to 5 players and they score more or less than their PrizePicks projection. You can earn up to 10 times your money in your entry. First time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. That's PrizePicks.com, promo code Locked On. Pretty good week for our PrizePicks picks. Thanks for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen today. We're free and available to you on all platforms. All right, let's dive into the surprising performances here. At quarterback, Andy Dalton, we kind of written him off as a fantasy factor here against the Rams defense. By the way, the Rams defense not playing what we're used to seeing from them with Jalen Ramsey and Aaron Donald. They just got demolished. We thought this was a great matchup up front for the Saints. They had their offensive line a little bit banged up. They held up there. I know that the Saints' defensive front was a little bit hurting there without Cameron Jordan and Marcus Davenport, but really the Saints dominate here. You get 260 and 3 here from Andy Dalton. He gets one to Juwan Johnson, one to Chris Olave. So he was locked into his key receivers. Even Jarvis Landry found the end zone in this game. So that's why they keep sticking with Andy Dalton. He's pretty good at home at the 1 p.m. Eastern Time games against struggling defenses. That's what we saw. I wouldn't chase the Andy Dalton points going forward. Again, he's been up and down, hit or miss with his production from week to week. He's more facilitator, and really he got it done without Alvin Kamara doing all that much here. So we'll see about Andy Dalton, but not a guy that I'm still looking at beyond Superflex leagues. Daniel Jones continues to produce like a QB1, 341 and 1 through the air. Did have 2 interceptions. He'd been really cutting down on the turnovers, but made up for it with 50 yards rushing and a TD there. So Daniel Jones gets it done. The Giants were in unique trail mode in this game. So there's garbage points to be had behind the Lions here, who were coming out and rolling. So the Giants were trailing for most of this game. Jones made it happen with his arm and legs to put up the numbers we wanted in fantasy. So the Giants lose, but we win in fantasy with Daniel Jones' fine performance, a lot more volume than we expected there in that Lions matchup for him this week. All right, running back, the standout performances, the Giants are playing the Cowboys in Dallas on Thursday for Thanksgiving on the afternoon. Well, they're going to have to contend with Tony Pollard, 21 touches, 189 yards, 2 receiving touchdowns. It was shot out of a cannon there. The Vikings defense didn't want to hit them. He scored easily, ran past them here. So another huge game for Tony Pollard returning from the injury. And you had Ezekiel Elliott there coming back strong there with him. 15 carries, only 42 yards, but they used him in the red zone. He had the 2 rushing touchdowns. So Pollard and Elliott, they found the right 1-2 punch with these guys, and they had the positive game script, so you could get 21 touches for Pollard, 15 for Zeke. Good red zone usage. Really hurt the Cowboys passing game here. Dak Prescott was able to throw this couple to Pollard here to save his day, but CeeDee Lamb, the rest of the receivers kind of disappeared in this one because they just dominated so much with the running game and defense. But Tony Pollard looks super fast. I think Elliott actually helps him because he gives him a bit of a power element to reduce the stress and touches so Pollard can stay fresh. So that's what we saw with Pollard, a big cog in the passing game that they've needed here in Elliott. Still a good power runner finishing drives. How about Najee Harris? 24 touches, 116 yards from scrimmage, 99 rushing, 2 scores on the ground. So really helped by the injury to Jalen Warren with a hamstring. And the Steelers were in the game for a while with Kenny Pickett looking a little bit better with his guys, George Pickens and Pat Freiermuth. So the second-year running back takes advantage of the second-year tight end and the rookie wide receiver doing something, and no Warren here. So the volume went up. Harris was overdue for this type of game. The Bengals' run defense not all that here. So Harris, maybe we'll watch the hamstring with Jalen Warren here, but you get the Colts in a tough spot this week. They're pretty good defense, but again, Harris might have just gotten out of the doghouse here. Well-timed with Warren going on the shelf. How about Josh Jacobs? He was the offense here at running back, 27 for 160 in terms of touches and production there. So no touchdowns for Jacobs. They only had a couple scores in that game, both to Devontae Adams. But the heartbeat and the destroyer of the Denver Broncos, that's what we've seen in Josh Jacobs, and we saw that in that game for sure. So no surprise there. Gets the Seahawks a pretty good matchup this week to stay hot. Isaiah Pacheco, finally a 100-yard rusher, the first one since early in 2021 for the Chiefs. Didn't have a touchdown, but clearly the lead power runner. He's also not involved in the receiving game. So be careful. It was a great matchup for Pacheco against the Chargers. I'm not that thrilled by it. I mean, you only got those 10.7 points, even in a starting high-volume effective role. So the touchdowns eventually hopefully should come. They throw a lot in the red zone, however, the Chiefs. And again, he's not going to give you too much in the receiving game, but definitely the injury to Clyde Edwards-Helaire opened things up for Pacheco, McKinnon only backfield here for the Chiefs. How about Jamal Williams? We talked about him now leading the NFL with 12 rushing touchdowns, 64 only, but 3 touchdowns there. DeAndre Swift got in the end zone again to salvage his day. But how about Justin Jefferson getting 66 yards there? So clearly Justin Jackson, I should say, another JJ in the NFC North. But when you look at Jamal Williams, Justin Jackson, these guys are going to be the power back runners here for the Lions, and they're a very good running team when their offensive line gets going downhill. But the bigger concern here is the fact DeAndre Swift just not seeing a lot of touches, getting the touchdowns. That's kind of what he's surviving on right now. So Williams, what a big year. He's the scorer. Swift is more the receiver and touchdown-dependent player at this point. But Williams almost every week is an RB2 just because of that threat to score in bunches, as we've seen. Devin Singletary and James Cook, the rookie, 86 yards rushing in that game against the Browns. The Browns' run defense is pretty awful, but interesting. Singletary was pretty effective there and ran pretty well. James Cook came off the bench and ran pretty well. So the team is pivoting a little bit more to the running game. We've seen this in November, December, as the Bills lean on that a little bit more to win games, playing off their defense, take pressure off their passing game a little bit, ease the burden on Josh Allen. Unfortunately, was not a good game for Josh Allen in that regard because of that. But interesting to see James Cook get those rushing yards. I know Nyheim Hines is a little bit involved in the receiving game, but clearly James Cook, if something were to happen to Singletary, he would be the lead power back of choice. How about Antonio Gibson? I know we were excited about Brian Robinson Jr., but he's a bit of a plotter, doesn't give you much in the passing game at all. But Antonio Gibson, we did have the Curtis Samuel touchdown get pilfered in the red zone. We also had a defensive touchdown, so it really hurt those guys' production there near the goal line. But 21 touches, 103 yards for Antonio Gibson. Still the lead back. Maybe more receiving forward here without J.D. McKissick, but clearly he's better than Robinson in getting the key touches here. When he gets a touchdown, he totally goes off. So Antonio Gibson has been pretty solid all season long as a high-end RB2. How about Damian Harris? He ran pretty well, 10 touches for 93 yards, cutting into Ramondre Stevenson's workload. Stevenson still did get majority of the touches, 2/3 there, and the key snaps, including all the receiving work. But Damian Harris still a little bit of value there that we've seen as the Patriots go run heavy. Their offense is pretty much all Harris and Stevenson, not much that you're getting from kind of passing game by committee from the wide receivers and tight ends with Mac Jones. So Damien Harris, we may have written him off a little bit. Definitely a high-end handcuff to Stevenson, but has some value on his own. Latavius Murray, 21 touches in that game for the Broncos in the revenge game against the Raiders. He gets a touchdown. Chase Edmonds gets hurt early this game. Melvin Gordon had more fumbling issues. He was able to recover it, but he still didn't look good in this game. So Murray might be taking over this backfield a little bit with his usage, effectiveness. We know he's a guy that he's up there in rushing yards. When you look at the active players, he just gets it done whenever he gets called upon for the Raiders or Vikings or Saints, and now the Broncos. He's just a guy that's going to get the yards are there. Pretty reliable power back. So like Latavius Murray going forward here, if he's the lead back in this backfield. Now, unfortunately, we lost Joe Mixon to a concussion, but what a game here for Samaje Perine. 15 touches, 3 receiving touchdowns, 82 yards. So clearly with Chris Evans a little bit banged up, the youngster, it is really Samaje Perine, right plug and play behind Joe Mixon. So we'll see the concussions, a little bit of a tough break here. See if he can turn around and play. I would still think it's on Perine to play this week. If Mixon can't be cleared, and Perine is a needed must-start plug and play. And one of the better handcuffs, I've been holding on to Perine in a league. Unfortunately, I couldn't get him in there with Mixon yesterday. Mixon had a decent game before he left, so it kind of tells you what may have happened if he didn't get hurt. But Perine did score twice while Mixon was still around. So Perine's going to have some value here. I think don't go chase him unless you're a Mixon manager and need your handcuff to protect your back this week. All right, Devontae Adams, 7 catches, 141 and 2. What else is new? He's the only thing going in the passing game. You have Foster Moreau and really Mac Hollins and Keelan Cole. Not much else going on in this passing game without Hunter Renfrow and one Darren Waller. So it's all about targets. Devontae Adams, he gets the game winner against the Broncos. So no surprise, Derek Carr completely locked in with Devontae Adams, and Adams putting up big numbers there. He was leading the league in receiving touchdown until Travis Kelce passed him with the Troika against the Chargers. T. Higgins, this is the last week for him to totally eat without Jamar Chase here. 9 catches, 148 yards. Tyler Boyd kind of faded. He got it was used with Trenton Irwin in the game. Perine's usage didn't help here, but Higgins came through again. 9 for 148. It's a good sign here to get favorable coverage with Chase coming back. Amari Cooper and Donovan Peoples-Jones go off 8 for 113 and 2 for Amari Cooper. So really took advantage of the weakened secondary there without Tre'Davious White. There again, he can eat these bad secondaries. Dane Jackson had a rough game covering both of these guys. Just weren't up to the task here, and I think Amari Cooper saw that. It was a dome situation with Ford Field, so went off there 8 for 113 and 2 for Amari Cooper. So very solid game. Has a great chemistry with Jacoby Brissett. We know one more game of Brissett before we see Deshaun Watson against the Texans. Donovan Peoples-Jones, he had everything in his repertoire as a wide receiver 3 except a touchdown. He gets it his first of the year there late from Brissett. So 5 for 61 and 1 from him. How about staying in the AFC North? How about Demarcus Robinson catching all 9 targets from Lamar Jackson, 128 receiving yards, pretty much nothing from James Prochet or Devin Duvernay after Mark Andrews in the passing game. So Demarcus Robinson clearly stepping up as the number 1 without Rashad Bateman. I don't think there's anything fluky here at all. This is are you for real for sure with Demarcus Robinson. I mean, he's just used too much, and there's definitely a trust and connection between him and Jackson. How about Chris Olave? Andy Dalton's put the ball in the right position for him to succeed here. 5 for 102 and a nice touchdown. Beautiful throw from Dalton to Olave. So Olave coming on strong as a rookie wide receiver here, as well as George Pickens at the same time. How about George Pickens with the game against the Bengals taking advantage? He gets a touchdown here and looks really good as the number 1, as we've seen it fade a little bit. So good game for the other rookie. Michael Pittman Jr., a little bit of a rebound game, maybe a good sign of things to come. 6 for 75 for him against the Eagles. Devontae Smith on the other side, 6 for 78. So solid games after these guys haven't been doing too much of late. Allen Robinson got it done early with Matthew Stafford, but Stafford now has a concussion. 4 for 47 and 1 for Allen Robinson here is the red zone threat that we thought he could be. So maybe he still has some value, even if it's John Wolford or Bryce Perkins, or maybe they bring back Blake Bortles. Something happens there, but I think Allen Robinson still clearly the number 1. 100-yard game finally for Wando Robinson. Unfortunately, he gets hurt in the game. Looks like a potential serious injury. Came in with a hamstring, played for that. Came out with the knee. So that could be it for Wando Robinson. 48 and a touchdown for Richie James. So another good game for him coming back fully from the concussion. You have Darius Slayton, 5 for 86, another solid game for him there. And how about Sky Moore on Sunday night? I mean, it was a Kadarius Toney injury that opened up the door, as well as Juju Smith-Schuster being out. We go Hardman on IR. Not much to be seen here from the other receivers. They had Justin Watson and Marcus Valdes-Scantling really struggled. But 5 for 63, they plugged and played Sky Moore, pretty much the Kadarius Toney role. So this receiving core keeps changing, right? It had Mecole Hardman was getting hot, and we thought, okay, fine, Marcus Valdes-Scantling is a big player. Okay, we like Juju. Then Juju got concussed. Then Kadarius Toney comes in. He gets hurt right away. Doesn't have any catches this one. Sky Moore gets an opportunity. So it keeps changing the revolving door here. Hard to trust anything in this Chiefs passing attack, not named Travis Kelce, from week to week based on the injuries and the usage here. And finally, let's look at tight end here. Logan Thomas, solid game. He's starting to feel it again with Taylor Heinicke, fully healthy, 5 for 65 to lead the team in receiving against the Texans. So good sign here against the Falcons this week. Juwan Johnson, the matchup was tough against Ernest Jones and the Rams, but he gets it done with a touchdown, 3 for 47. So another player that Dalton is facilitating, as well as Landry, Kamara, and Olave. Juwan Johnson has kept producing here while Adam Troutman has been hurting. And how about Pat Freiermuth? 12 targets to lead the team against the Steelers, 4 Kenny Pickett against the Bengals. He catches a solid 8 for 79 here. So Pat Freiermuth, the slot receiver, pretty much after Chase Claypool is gone. Deontay Johnson fading. So Freiermuth is pretty much being treated as a second target in the passing game after George Pickens also helped that Jalen Warren, their key receiving back, the rookie, was out for this game. So there you have it. There's a look at the surprise and standout performances and what they mean with our fantasy football reactions from Week 11 Sunday action. We'll get into the disappointing and break those down for you in our next segment here. This holiday season, find what you love at Total Wine and More. With so many great bottles to choose from, it's easy to find new favorite Cabernet or Chardonnay with the perfect gifts for everyone on your list, with some help from a friendly guide. All the confidence of knowing that you found something special for the lowest price. Love what you find only at Total Wine and More. Curbside pickup and delivery available in most areas. Visit TotalWine.com to learn more. That's Total Wine and More at TotalWine.com to learn more. Drink responsibly. Be 21 when you do so. I also have to tell you that this Locked On Fantasy Football episode is brought to you by Taro. Taro is the world's largest car sharing marketplace. With Taro, you can book any car you want, wherever you want it, from a community of local hosts. Browse a huge selections of vehicles for just about every occasional budget across the United States, United Kingdom, Canada, and coming soon to Australia. Book a spacious SUV or minivan for a family road trip. Get a classic or luxury car for a special event, birthday, or holiday. Find affordable economy cars if you're on a budget and just want to get to point A to point B. Test drive that new electric vehicle you've had your eye on to see how it fits into your everyday life. Many Taro hosts even deliver the car right to you, so that's great as well. And every trip with Taro is backed by liability insurance. Terms, conditions, and exclusions apply. Forget boring rental cars. Find your drive only at Taro.com. All right, thanks for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen today. For your next listen, check out Locked On Sports Today. From the games that matter the most, the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard, behind the scenes with local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today, available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. All right, it is time to break down the disappointing performances here of Week 11. Not too many total disappointments, but we'll get through them. Lamar Jackson, 209 and an interception, only 31 yards rushing against the Panthers. What happened here? Usually dominates rushing after the bye. Kind of was a little bit slow to the game. Maybe the illness did affect him. He did also have his second child was born there before the weekend, so maybe a little bit sluggish, tired, maybe taking the Panthers a little bit for granted. He ends up with a rushing touchdown late to kind of salvage a pretty bad day here. But the Panthers defense pretty tough. He's having trouble finding receivers other than Mark Andrews and Demarcus Robinson, so that's contributed to it. But the running is just the real questionable part. I think he'll be fine going forward, but just one of those clunker games for Lamar. He hasn't really played well reality-wise in a while, and that's hurting his fantasy numbers for sure. Another person who didn't play well reality or fantasy-wise, he didn't really break out of a slump. I know the Bills won the game, but 197-1. He got a short touchdown pass to Stephon Diggs. That's Josh Allen. Only 3 rushing attempts for 7 yards against the Browns. So unheard of that you'll have Allen rush for less than double-digit yards and throw for less than 200 yards in the same game with only one score. That did happen here. So a little bit sloppy again with Josh Allen. Maybe the elbow's hurting a little bit more than we think. Diggs was complaining a little bit early about the targets. They also went run heavy, as we told you, with Singletary and Cook to take advantage of the matchup against the Browns here. So they do get the Lions this week back in Ford Field. So hopefully the Lions defense, which is actually playing a little bit better, there can provide some numbers after they just gave up a big all-around passing and rushing game to Daniel Jones. So rebound in store finally for Allen, I think, after a sluggish three-game stretch. Russell Wilson, I don't know what to say. This offense looked terrible with Clint Kubiak taking over the play calling. There really didn't thread the needle with much here. Cortland Sutton led the team in receiving, but no touchdowns, 247-0, only 8 yards rushing. Just can't connect. Jerry Jeudy wasn't healthy. Didn't have KJ Hamler healthy, so it was a lot of forcing it to Kendall Hilton and Greg Dulcich. They didn't come through here. Sutton really not enough there. So really disappointing performance as the Broncos went run heavy and went even more conservative and then open things up for Wilson against a bad Raiders secondary pass defense overall. Kirk Cousins, this is just one of those games, 105-0. The game script got out of hand for the Vikings. That really put also in the mix Justin Jefferson, only 3 for 33. Dalvin Cook couldn't get going enough in this game. No Adam Thielen, no TJ Hawkinson. The game script just went way bonkers here as the Cowboys pulled away early with some big scores. We talked about Pollard and Elliott and just really poured it on here. And the Cousins and the Vikings were under siege here without Christian Darrisaw. He got concussed here. So another key injury there that develops at left tackle, the rookie or the second-year player from Virginia Tech. So when you look at that, that was not very good here for Cousins. 105-0, negative points here with the sacks and turnovers. So brutal day for Kirk Cousins, but hopefully he rebounds. Patriots defense not so easy this week, Thursday. Thanksgiving night game against the Bill Belichick. It doesn't inspire too much. It's also a night game. We know Cousins doesn't do well in prime time. So buyer beware. You might want to pivot if you have a quarterback in a better matchup this week. Daniel Jones did okay, but Saquon Barkley did not. 13 touches, 35 yards. To add insult, Jones gets a rushing touchdown. And Matt Breida also scores on the ground. Saquon Barkley, I don't know what was going on here. One of those clunker games. It's not going to get any easier against the Cowboys, who could have turned in that negative game script. We saw what happened to Dalvin Cook, got bottled up. So really disappointing performance and a potential smash spot for Saquon Barkley, especially after the Texans' destruction last week. Dameon Pierce, it's really hard to run on the Texans or the Commanders, and it was really hard for the Texans to run this game. 12 touches, 17 yards. He disappeared, didn't even give the garbage production there late in the game. So nothing to see there. Davis Mills dragging this entire offense down here. So really rough outing for Dameon Pierce for sure there. Some better matchups coming ahead, but again, you knew it was going to come. Sometimes you hit a rookie wall in this particular matchup with Jonathan Allen, Deron Payne. That's what we saw there. Donta Foreman, if the game script is not good, he's pretty bad, but this game script was even and he was bad. 11 touches for 24 yards. You were a little bit of Chuba Hubbard involved. So Donta Foreman is just not reliable in fantasy, and that's what we saw here. Brian Robinson, only 15 carries, 57 empty yards. So if he's not getting the touchdown, not getting the receptions, not a lot of value there. So great matchup against the Texans, but you got to hold our horses here. Antonio Gibson is still the key lead and better effective back. Miles Sanders, only 14 for 48. We thought this run defense was a little bit easier without Shaquille Leonard, but just not getting the key touches there. Jalen Hurts had a big rushing performance, so that hurt Miles Sanders using Kent Gainwell, Boston Scott in the later situation. So not great for Miles Sanders overall. How about the duo of Michael Carter and James Robinson? 16 combined touches, 27 yards there. So pretty bad there between those two. Ramondre Stevenson, 21 for 78. That was disappointing because Damian Harris had the better run. No touchdowns for Stevenson in that brutal game. Let's look at on the other side, wide receiver. DJ Moore, what can you say? 3 catches, 24 yards. Terrace Marshall Jr. looks like the better receiver at this stage for the Panthers. You only had, again, a terrible 2 for 12 there for Garrett Wilson. Unfortunately, stuck with a bad quarterback in Zach Wilson, who only completed like 9 passes in that game against the Patriots, only like 100 yards of total offense. Terrible. We talked about Justin Jefferson disappearing 3 for 33. Deontay Johnson still doesn't have a touchdown, now fading as a receiver, 4 for 21 there. So pretty brutal for Deontay Johnson this week, as well as George Pickens gets the love, as well as Freiermuth, including the touchdown there. So really not good for Deontay Johnson. Maybe the chemistry with him and Kenny Pickett may not be reheated until next year. Johnson really needed the Mitchell Trubisky, I guess, and it just has been pretty brutal. All right, We'll get into our injury updates rapid fire in our final segment here, things you need to know coming out of the games. But before we do that, we did tell you at the top of this episode, Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is a daily fantasy made easy. You just have to look at the totals, say, we're looking at the projections available there for George Kittle, Deebo Samuel tonight, or we're looking at the other side with James Conner. Well, you just predict if a player is going to go more or less than their PrizePicks projections. You just pick 2 to 5 players, if they score more or less than their PrizePicks projections as you've selected. You can win up to 10 times your money on entry. No competing against other people, just you versus projections available. PrizePicks offers projections on any sport that you watch. It's NFL, NBA, MLB when it's in season, NHL with hockey and hoops in full swing right now. We know college basketball is here. And don't forget about soccer here with the World Cup. A lot of good stuff there on PrizePicks. Entries can be made 60 seconds or less. It's that easy. Safe and fast withdrawals, currently operational in more than 30 states and Canada. Download the PrizePicks app and go to PrizePicks.com to sign up today to play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive 100% instant deposit match of $100 with the promo code Locked On. If you deposit $100, PrizePicks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, PrizePicks will give you $50. Don't forget to enter promo code Locked On and sign up for instant deposit match up to $100. Only PrizePicks.com. Great way to play daily fantasy sports here to close the 2022 season. All right, we will close the show here with our rapid-fire injury updates that you know. Justin Fields was hurting at the end of the game. Left shoulder, so not the throwing shoulder for Justin Fields, but in pain here. They do get a little while to rest, so we'll see how he fares. I think he might play through it, but we won't know more until Wednesday there for Fields. So be prepared to possibly be out without the red-hot QB in fantasy. Matthew Stafford, I think he might be shut down, folks. This is the second concussion in a week here for the Rams quarterback. And John Wolford also missed the game with a neck injury. So it could be Bryce Perkins starting, or maybe they get Blake Bortles, as we suggested, might be coming out of retirement here to play for the Rams. Joe Mixon, concussion in the protocol. Samaje Perine with those 3 touchdowns. So we'll have to see if Mixon can be cleared to play this week. Chase Edmonds, not that you were playing him in fantasy, but out of the mix there with Latavius Murray and Melvin Gordon, ankle injury. Clyde Edwards-Helaire not playing him either. So more for Isaiah Pacheco. Ankle injury was forced out early of that Chargers game. Jalen Warren, hamstrung, ruled out, and that really helped Najee Harris's volume there immediately against the Bengals. So we'll see if Warren can play, but hamstrings are tough, especially for rookies this time of year. Speaking of hamstring, Kadarius Toney got injured again early, didn't put up any numbers before he got hurt. So Kadarius Toney, a hard guy to rely upon right when you thought he was going to be good to go. The injury happens here, and they go to elsewhere at receiver. Mike Williams, tough break, aggravated the ankle injury, 1 catch for 15 yards before he had to depart there against the Chiefs. Wando Robinson may have suffered a significant knee injury against the Lions after his 100-yard game, his breakout game, the rookie from Kentucky. There, so tough sledding there. And we had Kyle Pitts, tough one there with a knee injury, had to exit that game against the Bears. Maybe avoided the major any ligament damage there, but those are the key injuries you need to know coming out of week number 11. So not too much damage here on the board. It could have been gotten a lot worse. We'll track other things, but the guys we're tracking most this week, Joe Mixon, the Rams and the Bears quarterback situation, and Kadarius Toney, see if he can return to have some fantasy value before the end of the season. And Kyle Pitts again. He hasn't been great, but he had an opportunity to make some plays against the Bears, and it'll be tough for that Falcons offense against the Commanders if they do not have him this week. So there you have it. There's a breakdown here of the news and information, reaction, all that good stuff you need to know from the Week 11 biggest storylines there in fantasy football, including the injury updates here. So thanks for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast, the biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. It's available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. For Locked On Fantasy Football, for our Monday reaction show here, this has been Vinnie Iyer. We'll be back to break down the waiver wire here for week number 12 on Locked On Fantasy Football Tuesday.